What's good, everybody? What's up, man? This is Stephen Qualls II, aka Mr. Qualified. It's your boy, and I have my wonderful co-host here. I,
Yeah.
I always get messed up which way it's gonna look on the actual. It's fine. Anyway, we are back. We are here to give you another episode of the Wright Quallity. Man, we have a full docket ready for y'all today, so we just gonna hop right into the first topic. The first topic is personal. I want to touch on it because, I hope that things change this year. I hope we see some differences. But I think we have to talk about the Bucks. And I think it's a serious conversation in the sense of where do they really stand right now, and what is their kind of legacy of this era going to be? Because we're getting to a point now where Giannis obviously is a two-time back-to-back MVP, won MVP and Defensive Player of the Year last year. And he's pretty much been on the scene, in the spotlight, seen as a top player in this league. This probably his third year being in that position, I feel like. You look back at 2019 and you look at the fact that they had an amazing regular season, went through the playoffs, and then, ran into Toronto and in that wall. And I think everybody kind of thought, okay, you kind of expect that. That was their first time there. A lot of adjustments need to be made, etc. They come back the next season, look even better. Giannis looks even better. And then they run into the same issue in the playoffs. And so now you have this year where obviously they have some new pieces and the team is not entirely different. Your core is still intact, but you have basically a new supporting cast for the most part. And the team's playing good. Giannis is, still Giannis. But, as a fan, you still don't see them in a space where you really could say they're over the hump. Or at least you don't feel like that. I think, biased fan or not, I think you could be honest and say, like, they look good. And, I am confident they can win games. When it comes to winning series, that hasn't been proven yet. What are your thoughts on the Bucks as championship contenders, and what do you feel like they need to do to become more solidified as contenders?
Honestly, when we talked about it before and how you said, you don't think people would choose the Bucks to come out of their conference. I think that's true. And honestly, I thought that was true prior to the Nets landing James Harden. I think the Bucks honestly need to hone in defensively and trust what their identity is. I don't think everyone is bought in. I think since trading Bledsoe and landing Drew Holiday, it's been kind of a shift when honestly there didn't need to be a shift. Drew Holiday is, in a lot of ways kind of similar to Bledsoe. He could do a lot of things that Bledsoe can do. And I think arguably defensively, Drew Holiday is a little bit better in that regard.
Measures better. That's
not. So it's like in terms defensively, on paper, you should have gotten better. And I don't think the Bucks have really bought into that. And to get over the hump, that's what needs to happen. And I think kind of letting Giannis play his game, like while I feel like a lot of people have has Giannis's number, which means that, a lot of people have kind of are able to anticipate what Giannis is going to do next. Like we talked about last week, Giannis is a player that's dominant, but when it comes to him shooting, I'm not necessarily scared. I'm not running out to guard him beyond the three-point line, and that makes it easier for opposing defenders. So what the Bucks need to do is, kind of get Giannis the ball where he's comfortable with the ball while also honing in defensively.
I'd agree. Shaq was touching on this, and basically it was Shaq and Chuck arguing per usual, and Chuck was basically saying like that Giannis needs to expand his game, and he said Giannis basically has a long way to go in terms of development. Now, long way seems a bit excessive, in terms of like long implying that there's so much more. I think Giannis is maybe a shift away in terms of like not even adding something to his game, but just adding or evolving like one specific piece. I don't think there's a lot of work left. I think it's just a matter of Giannis figuring out how to be more effective and how to not be limited, as opposed to expanding more of his game. Because I don't think Giannis is not meant to be a shooter. So as much as he will probably become better over time, I don't think we're going to see Giannis become, this person that we're expecting mid-range jumpers from. That's just not his game. And it doesn't necessarily have to be. But to a point that Shaq made, I think a lot of it is like you mentioned, the coach putting you in position to be effective. Because they spoke about how Giannis doesn't really use a post game. Um, and it's like Giannis probably does have a post game, but their offense is not set up for him to be in the post because he's surrounded by shooters. So while obviously being in the post will still make those players effective, Giannis is also not a stationary player in that regard. That's not what makes Giannis dominant, being stationary. So I think to another one of your points, I think they're trying to figure some things out. I think I'm not too upset because I am not mad at the fact that they seem to be experimenting. And I would much rather the team experiment and figure out lineups, try to figure out what they really think they want their identity to be. Because I would agree that they don't necessarily need to change their identity, but Drew brings a completely different level than Bledsoe does on defense and on offense. So I don't think you can be the exact same because I don't think there was a certain expectation from Bledsoe offensively that you have from Drew. And Drew's already going to do what he does defensively anyway. So I think your dynamic does change a little bit. And I'd much rather them work out those kinks now in the regular season. So at least they have an identity when they go into the playoffs and they're not figuring it out then, or they're not adjusting because they haven't seen anything or any new looks or whatever the case may be. So I'm not too upset at how's the season going, but I do think Giannis needs to be even better. I will say that. I do think Giannis still needs to elevate to the extent of elevate his game. He needs to be consistently on the level of LeBron and be Jokic. Like his production needs to be that. And it needs to be in a manner that is pushing his team to victories. And I just want to see more of that as the season goes on.
To me, I think you said that Giannis doesn't have a lot to change. I think that he does, honestly. I think, like you said, he's not going to be that player that we expect elbow jump shots from. But I honestly feel like he has to become that player because like I said, a lot of defenders have his number. And so when I can anticipate what you're doing, you're that much less effective. And I feel like if Giannis is continuing to be complacent in his game, you guys will continue to have the type of seasons that you have coming into the season with high expectations and then ending up, out of the playoffs after the second, third round. So to me, it kind of reminds me of James Harden's Rockets, where, that identity of offense, offense, offense didn't get them anywhere. And with the Bucks, kind of not changing, I guess the dynamic of that team will ultimately lead them to the same type of seasons.
I'd agree with that, and I think change and expand are words that have been used almost like in the same context, and I don't think they imply the same thing. Um, and I probably would agree more with change than I would expand because I don't think Giannis necessarily needs to add a lot as much as he needs to change the way he does certain things.
Yeah.
But I also think the relationship. Giannis is one of these. Giannis is one of those superstars. Giannis is not LeBron. LeBron's coach, for the most part, really doesn't matter. Like, not to take anything away from the coach, but LeBron's gonna know what to do,
Right.
regardless. He's gonna know how to impact the game. He's gonna know how to get to his spots. He doesn't need a coach to tell him that, and he's kind of always been that way. And very few players are like that. I think Kevin Durant falls into that line, but I think it's a very select class of people who don't need a coach to make them better.
Mhm.
Giannis needs a coach. Giannis needs a coach that's going to put him in the right position. Giannis needs a coach that's going to. Giannis needs a coach that's going to help him because he needs the help that other superstars have not in respect to learning the game and how to strategically be efficient as opposed to just being dominant, as we touched on last week. So I think that relationship with Bud is really going to be what makes or break, this time. And with him resigning, a lot of this is now on him. So as a player, if you're not, pushing the coach, or if you're just not taking that initiative yourself, then something's gonna have to give at some point. But you made the decision to be here, so you also have to, still put in the work. Like the organization went out and got Drew Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Middleton is doing his part. He's having a career year. And Middleton's been consistent for the most part. I haven't had much of an issue with Middleton's production. It's on you now.
I got a question.
Yeah.
How many more seasons like this do you have before you start to realize maybe Giannis can't be a leader? Similar to what we've grown to see with Russell Westbrook and like his departure with OKC, his departure with Houston, and now him in Washington. How many more seasons can Giannis have where there is no championship before you start to look at him like maybe we need to pair you? One more season?
This season. It's tough. It is hard for me to admit that. But in all honesty, we've had 3 years now to see you make adjustments. And it's not even to say that adjustments haven't been made, because you could speak to a lot of different things. Like with Toronto, as much as they walled up Giannis, like the bench completely disappeared in that series. In Miami, you could speak to the bubble, because Milwaukee didn't look good in the bubble at all. So you could speak to maybe the bubble, the adjustment, whatever the case may be. And the bench didn't really show up there either. So and that's not to make an excuse, because it's still like Giannis still should be the type of player that makes up for that. He should be. But it just hasn't happened. So this year, you have a better point guard. Your second go-to player is continuing to get better and elevate his game. I don't know if the supporting cast is better or worse necessarily, but at the same time, after this season, if y'all don't at least make it to the conference finals and lose to Brooklyn or Philly in like 6 or 7, and they just like literally brought out everything to beat y'all, you're gonna have to look at like maybe Giannis isn't a leader. And they have said that before. They said maybe Giannis is a superstar that just isn't meant to be the leader. It doesn't mean he's not your go-to. He's just not your leader. And I think superstars are often expected to be leaders, but the reality is not all really are meant to. And I wouldn't go as far as saying Giannis doesn't have it in him, but I do think he needs to figure out what that looks like for him and how that translates not only in the locker room, because I think everybody would speak to him being a great guy and things of that nature, but on the court, are you, by example, consistently, are you leading, and not just by stat stuffing, but willing your team to victories, like down the stretch, like keeping the camaraderie of your team intact? Are you doing that? And I think that's the part that Giannis is missing right now. And I think that's really the key to the Bucks getting over the hump. Because to be completely honest, I think the Bucks have as good of a chance as any team. I think the East is open in the sense of, when it comes to a 7-game series, like while either Boston, Brooklyn, or Philly would be tough, I think it's up in the air. I think either team, depending on how their players come out, I don't think there's any series that's like one team is just severely overmatched. I just don't see that, because all of the teams are still figuring things out. Like in Boston, those 3 players, they're only in their second year together. In Philly, this is probably the most healthy and in shape Embiid has been, along with Simmons in the last couple of years. And Tobias has just now really taken the leap that he's taken, an even bigger leap to the status he's at. And then Brooklyn, obviously, they just got together this year. So all these teams are still kind of figuring things out in a lot of ways. So I don't think there's any clear favorite as to who has the upper edge. So I think as long as they figure out and get those loose screws together, I think Milwaukee has as good a chance as anybody. It's just a matter of, can y'all win games and can y'all defend? That's what it's going to come down to as well. But yeah, praying it's a long season, but yeah, I just hope it doesn't continue to be a very difficult year as a Wisconsin sports fan. I just really hope it gets better.
The Brewers are going to start their season soon.
At this point, look, man, hope they got it.
They won't. The Cardinals just got Arenado, so.
Yeah, but yeah, the Brewers I haven't heard too much major news coming from them, so I don't know. I'm probably gonna keep up more. I'm gonna try to start keeping up more with baseball. I used to play baseball. I don't know why I stopped keeping up with it, but nonetheless, we'll move on to the next topic. Next topic, your boy. I'm like, I'll let you bring this segment in. What you want to say about your boy,
Man, LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball. I've always said, in my opinion, he's the best ball brother in terms of how he plays basketball.
He
He
has,
came into the league fearless, and I love it. I
yeah,
love it.
he
What were
has.
you about to say?
I was gonna say he probably has. I don't want to say Lonzo wasn't necessarily NBA ready. I don't want to go that far, but LaMelo
Mhm.
definitely has the most well-rounded game, and really ever since he came out of high school, I want to say that's been the case. Because I
Yeah.
think we saw when he was overseas or playing in the NBL, wherever he was at, um, you could tell his game was well-rounded. You could tell he was becoming a better shooter. He, I don't know. Is he a better point guard than Lonzo?
I think he is.
I'm hesitant to
Not
say,
only
but
does
I'm
he,
also not. You know,
the way he passes the ball,
yeah,
like his passing is better. I think he makes his own shots in a better way. I, I
yeah,
think he's more confident than Lonzo. It's
yeah.
just, I would say he's better than Lonzo.
And I don't know if Lonzo was maybe affected by coming into the league and playing with Bron, and then you get shipped to New Orleans, and you're still not that guy. You're always kind of a
I would say Lonzo had a lot more pressure than LaMelo
yeah,
because LeVar Ball was a lot more hands on with Zoe in terms of like his voice in the media.
yeah,
Then you got drafted by the Lakers and you kind of have this pressure of playing Los Angeles basketball.
yeah.
And he got drafted where fans were able to come to the game. So you're hearing this chatter from the media about your dad and then also having to uphold the standards of a number 2 overall pick. So I think obviously he had a lot more pressure than LaMelo.
Yeah, and I think even with that, being said though, I still think you look at LaMelo and I don't know, like LaMelo was doing all this coming off the bench,
Mm-hmm.
initially, and like you said, I think the fearlessness that Melo has is just something that Zoe didn't.
Yeah,
And I think we're starting to see how that fearlessness is playing off. I do agree though, Melo being in Charlotte, and Melo maybe not being expected to carry everything right away, probably gave him the freedom to
mm-hmm.
be as fearless because Melo's like, well, I mean, I don't really got nothing to lose per se because the organization didn't bring me in to be like take us to the promised land.
Right.
Like, I'm coming in playing behind a guard or two at that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just here, to make my mark. And he's able to do that. Whereas Lonzo, like you said, came into LA, immediate, pressure, immediate need or expectation, to excel in some capacity or be promising.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just tough. I don't want to say Lonzo got the short end of the stick, but I definitely don't think what's happened to him thus far has been good for his career. I don't think he's going to thrive in. I don't think he's going to thrive in New Orleans, and I don't know what that situation looks like moving forward. And I don't really know what situation looks best for Lonzo, to be completely honest. I don't think Lonzo's as versatile as LaMelo in that regard either. So I think that kind of even speaks more to him being a better ball brother and also him potentially ended up having a better career if,
Yeah,
if we're being completely honest.
honestly, the Friday night game he had against the Jazz, while Charlotte lost, I think that was obviously the best game that LaMelo has had. He dropped 30 plus points on arguably the hottest team in the NBA right now. That says something about his talent.
Yeah,
And the Jazz, they aren't punks on defense. You've got to go through Donovan Mitchell. You've got to give Rudy Gobert make contact at the basket. And the fact that he was able to do all those things is very promising. But to your point about Lonzo not really fitting in New Orleans, there has been like reports of New Orleans shopping Zoe. And honestly, I think being traded so much too early in your career, while obviously we're not NBA players, but I think that does take a toll on a young player's confidence as well. Like I keep being shipped from team to team. Where do I fit and who really wants me to be a part of their organization?
Yeah, and I think you probably hit it on the head though. I think I don't wanna put it all on LeVar and make it seem like everything was bad because everything wasn't bad. Like, was he a lot and was he overbearing? Probably in a lot of ways, for sure. But also, I mean, you love to see that. You love to see him being an advocate for his son because that's really all he was doing. Like as much as it was excessive to a degree, he was just being an advocate for his son. So I don't want to put it all on him, like the way Zoe's career has gone.
Mhm.
But I do think the target Zoe had on his back, what he came into the league having to prove, not because of him, but because of LeVar, may also play a role. And I don't think teams are worried now about taking on Lonzo and like LeVar being too involved. I think people have they see Zoe as his own man now. But I think it's still more so about his game. Where does a player like Zoe fit? Like what kind of point guard is he? Like what is he gonna consistently bring you every night? Is he gonna make the players around him better, or does he need to have like good or great players around him for him to be the most efficient or for him to be his best? I think that's yet to be figured out. I mean, also at this point, this is what Zoe's
Fourth or fifth?
fourth year. Point is, so Lonzo been in the league 4 years, and that's still really early. So I think he still has time, but I would say in terms of him finding a home, clock may be ticking.
Yeah.
Because if he keeps getting shot, it's going to become a thing where he's going to become a backup, like a rotating backup. I think he's better than that. I think he's better than a rotating backup. But I think he has to figure out where that is and what that looks like. And I think that's probably what's holding him back. But yeah, man, Melo's having a great year. Right now, he's my call for rookie of the year. I think everything that he's doing with it being off the bench just speaks, volumes. That's not to say like Wiseman, is having an amazing year. I know he's injured right now, but amazing year. Anthony Edwards has been playing great as well, especially in the absence of Cat. But I'm still going with Melo, man, because I don't know if people thought Melo would produce like this. I think people thought he was NBA ready and he would, be effective. But I don't think we thought we'd see him putting up some of the numbers he's been putting up, leading rookies in all categories, and being a key fixture of this Charlotte team so early.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure. Anything else on Melo?
No, that's it.
For sure. Moving on to the next thing. So Ashley, the league wants to have an All-Star game. Please, please.
Stupid.
This really should have just been the moment of clarity, to be completely honest. But
Yeah.
but nonetheless, why are we doing this? First off, for y'all that don't know, there is a proposed, and I guess they're getting pretty close to setting up an All-Star game. It's going to be a one-day thing with an All-Star game. I think they say a skills contest, something else. I think first weekend in March, and it's going to be in Atlanta. Uh, here's here's the thing. So apparently there wasn't supposed to be an All-Star game this year.
There was supposed to be a 5 game break in the middle of the season. That was promised to the players prior to this season starting. Obviously, with the shortened season, they wanted some break. So where kind of like the discrepancies come in is where LeBron James feels like you guys promised us a 5 game break. Having an all-star game during that break does not make it a break anymore. What is interesting to me though is obviously LeBron and Chris Paul are, like this. Chris Paul is the president of the Players Association, meaning Chris Paul is ultimately agreeing to having this game where the 5 game break is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So that honestly makes it that much more interesting because you have a figure like LeBron James kind of being against it, and you have one of his best friends saying, "Oh, this might be great for us."
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I know a lot of analysts were saying that they don't believe that LeBron didn't know that this was in the works. So to essentially be caught off guard or surprised, just really doesn't make sense given that relationship with Chris Paul. Um, And I think that LeBron also has a completely different perspective. I mean, I think in general, the consensus around the league is that it probably just isn't the smartest thing to do and it isn't necessary. Which I think Bron, amidst the break everybody had from the league shutting down and coming back to the bubble, they obviously, were the last team standing. So they played from July to the middle of October. And then they had, barely a 2-month break. Not even at that, if you consider training camp and everything. And then they're back in full swing for the regular season. That's already condensed and things of that nature. So, obviously a player like LeBron and probably any, superstar that, went relatively deep in the playoffs is probably kind of feeling like, what's the point? And that's all before you even consider the fact, that it's the pandemic.
Mhm.
And the fact that it's just not, the safest thing to do, probably. So I don't, it would be funny if Ron legitimately didn't play. But I could honestly see him making that decision like Bron now. Because what are you gonna tell LeBron that he has to come play?
I don't. I think if Bron says, "Oh, I'm not going to play," he's bluffing because he said he wasn't going to play like the first couple of games of the season.
He
You
did.
know,
But what I will say is I think the first couple games of the season I think is different to an All-Star game because honestly the All-Star game isn't necessary. Like we can all agree that the All-Star game this season isn't necessary.
Mhm.
And would he do it? Probably not. But I'm saying if he did, I personally wouldn't be surprised because it's like what I will say though, if LeBron doesn't play, there's a lot of players that won't. Um,
like you're okay. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, but I still feel like he's bluffing. You know what I mean? If he would say, "I'm not going to play," but like, it's very. I don't. I just think it's stupid. And then why Atlanta?
why Atlanta?
Where did that come from? Like,
And I know, like Stephen A was making a point that like obviously a lot of the proceeds and everything like will help give aid or will benefit HBCUs in some capacity. So there
proceeds
is some.
from
I'm not exactly sure.
like
I'm not sure what everything consists of here, but something is benefiting HBCUs and whatever is going to happen, which is cool, which is
yeah,
great.
that's great.
But
But
also
where
in
is
the same breath, I just at what expense? I don't see the point in forcing this, and it feels like it's being forced to happen. I think fans will be fine with no
Mhm.
All-Star game. I may not speak for every fan, but I don't think we care that much about an All-Star game because we're getting basketball. So
And to me, it's like even if you wanted players to be able to say, "Oh, I was an all-star during such and such season when there was a pandemic," just leave it up to voting. It doesn't necessarily have to be a game played. I don't know if that's maybe the reason why they feel like the game has to happen or what. But
I guess it just doesn't seem smart. It doesn't seem necessary. It seems forced, and I with the league having the protocols that they have, I just don't see why we're pushing this when you doing what you did to KD on Friday. Like what? First,
freeze Kevin.
free me, he said. Free me. But no, like it doesn't. I mean, these protocols, like, wow, obviously, like they're in place, and for the most part, they've been helpful. It's getting to the point where, like, this is. I don't want to say excessive because I don't want to downplay, obviously, the need to take precaution within the pandemic. But this idea of contact tracing and for the league in respect to like trying to keep players on the court as much as possible, I gotta figure this out. I gotta make sense of this. Like I see, we slowly starting to let fans in and whatnot. Why? Why are we doing that? To be completely honest, because everybody already knows. Like everybody was already expecting fans not to be able to be in the arena. So why even change it? Especially if you got protocols in place to deal with A, B, and C. You're already being strict about the players not being able to trade jerseys and touch after the game. They don't play the football,
Touch.
sweating each other, sweating and everything. But it's just too many factors that I feel like the league is kind of allowing in at this point,
Mhm.
and it's becoming contradictory because it's like you can't be taking players out of contact tracing all the time and going back and forth with these protocols, but then you also allowing extra people into the arena that's unnecessary, or you already making it to where like the players can't can barely do anything. So what's the point of having anybody else, in the arena if they already limited? So I don't know, but
I
that
just made a
yeah.
connection though. Atlanta is actually allowing fans into the arena. We saw the debacle between the fan and Bron, so maybe the All Star game is in Atlanta because fans are allowed in that arena.
That even speaks more to the point of why this shouldn't be happening. I just don't understand. It's the most open city in the country right now. I really don't understand the correlation. Um, do you think the league should be changing some of the protocols as it relates to COVID, like just especially given like how it was handled with KD Friday night? Like, do you think that it's getting to a point where it's becoming like super contradictory or excessive, or to the point where it's not necessarily being a benefit anymore?
Yeah, it's hella contradicting. Like you said, you don't want players trading jerseys, blah 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 blah, but you want to ship them to Atlanta to have a one night All Star game. Like you're risking so much for one night, you know?
So
And with the whole KD thing, I honestly just feel like the NBA should have been in a bubble. I really do. If we were gonna have this season, have them in a bubble. I know the bubble took like a mental toll on the players or whatever, but it just seems to be the safest route. When, over the summer when the bubble was going on, there were very low numbers, if any, for the NBA. So that was something that, they were kind of, bragging about. So going back to that wouldn't necessarily be a horrible idea to prevent, like we talked about last week, these players hindering their teams from being able to be necessarily where they would be if those same players were able to be on the floor.
yeah, I mean, in the bubble, there were hardly any. I don't think there were any positive COVID tests, especially because if you left and came back, you had to quarantine, and they were pretty strict about that. And we've said it before that they definitely should have kept the bubble idea if they really want to have a successful season and not have things get in the way of actually having players on the court. But I guess it's big business, so they trying to experiment. I guess if that's what you want to call it. But yeah, so moving on from league protocols and COVID and contradictions and all of that good stuff. Moving on to Jimmy Butler. We talked about Jimmy Butler last episode. He is back. As far as his game, nothing has changed. He does still look smaller, but I mean that doesn't seem to have any effect on his energy. I think he just recently dropped a triple double. So he looks good. I just want to touch on that. I'm glad he's back. I'm glad it doesn't seem to be more serious. Like we were saying last week, we weren't really sure, and he hadn't been playing much to begin with, so we didn't really know what the status of that situation was. But it's good to see him back. It's good to see him playing well. I know we said off camera that like Jimmy, for both of us, has become one of our maybe not favorite players, but we both like him a lot. Love seeing him play. So, did you have anything you want to touch on as far as Jimmy is concerned?
No, like you said, you touched on it. I'm really happy to see that he's back. He looks healthy. While he's small, he still looks like, he didn't miss a beat in terms of his game.
What you call him? You call him a skinny mini?
Yeah, skinny mini.
That's disrespectful. I don't think men want to be called that. But no, glad to see Jimmy back, and glad to see that he's still hooping, as the kids would say. One thing I want to touch on, one last thing I want to touch on is the year that James Harden is having since he's been in Brooklyn. I feel like we talk about Brooklyn every episode, but I honestly don't see how we wouldn't. Just given the fact that I don't think we've seen anything of that caliber since that Miami era.
Yeah.
So it's it got to be talked about. But I mean, there's also there's always going to be a story there because they're trying to figure things out. They're obviously championship contenders, so there'll always be something to talk about. But to Harden's year, Harden is just about averaging a triple double since being in Brooklyn. I mean, I feel like every other game the man got a triple double, and it seems like he's doing it with ease. Like it doesn't seem like he's really going out of his way or doing anything super excessive to get these numbers. But I know one of the first things we talked about when the trade happened was the one ball thing and how's this going to work when you have so many ball dominant players. I think we mentioned it before, but I think people forgot how versatile Harden is. And I think people have also forgotten that this is the first team, like Harden in OKC, obviously, was still a great player, but he's not the Harden that he is now, just in terms of mental approach to the game, even skill-wise to a certain degree. So, he's obviously better and has evolved as a player. So when you take somebody that still has always had the skill set, of a point guard in essence, and you put him around actual, not actual talent, but you put him around the type of talent that he's with now, it's not really super surprising. But what do you make of what he's doing in Brooklyn so far, and what do you think? What kind of role do you think that will play in the championship aspirations that that team has?
Man, they look great. And, a lot of people, I guess, assumed that Kyrie would be the person handling the ball. Playing through James Harden is fantastic. Like, I love it. And I think that's how, you kind of eliminate the whole it's only one ball narrative, because he can score, he can pass, and it just right now it's working very, very well. And I think honestly, much of the credit should go to Steve Nash as well. He was a player who was a pass first point guard, and
Mhm.
being able to kind of give those tools to James and let him showcase, I can do that too. That has really been working, and it's been proving to be a great method for the Nets.
And I think, I think James Harden is probably in the best position he's ever been in his
Mhm.
career, even better than in OKC. And here's why. So in OKC, Harden obviously was the third option to Russ and KD. And because of that, he didn't have as much on floor time. And then on top of that, as much as he could exist on the floor with them, KD, as great as he was, KD was still figuring a lot out in OKC. And Russ was definitely figuring a lot out in those early stages of OKC. So there was a lot that they kind of had to work through. And I think KD and Russ needed, well, Russ still needed the ball. I think KD needed the ball even more back then because things were still being figured out.
Mhm.
You look at where Harden is now, you look at where KD is now, even where Kyrie is now. KD's probably the most efficient scorer in the league, right? So that's a given. You know what you're gonna get from KD. Kyrie is a time bomb. Like Kyrie can literally there are points where Kyrie can literally get whatever he wants. Like the man is insane.
Mhm.
With all that being said, I still consider Harden to be the biggest threat on the Nets, and here's why. If you want Harden to be a point guard and just facilitate, he
Yep.
can.
Yep.
But in doing that, it's almost like you forget for half a second that that's James Harden.
Yeah.
In the fact that he could easily go from facilitating to going on a 15, 16-0 run himself.
Yep.
And he's in the position to do that, and the team you can't double James Harden now.
Mhm.
You can't do, there's no scheme you can give James Harden. So whenever James wants to, he can decide, all right, I facilitated enough. It's time for me to get in my bag. And he's one of the most dangerous and one of the most unguardable players in that regard. So I think James is the biggest threat in that regard because that ability to facilitate is something that he does the best on the team.
Mhm.
So I think that's even scary. And if Harden continues to play at this level, he's going to be the key in my mind to a Brooklyn championship.
Honestly, I agree. And I saw this stat is super interesting. That big three alone is averaging 80 points per game. 80 points per game. Yeah, that's crazy. You've got 80 points per game from three people alone. Three
What?
people alone. Yes.
Good Lord, they are insane.
It was great.
This, good God.
I even feel like, despite the losses to Cleveland and, a couple more games that they shouldn't have lost, that like come April, May, they'll
Yeah,
be together.
those losses are going to happen.
Mhm.
Any given night, like these things are going to happen. You're going to have games where you could come out flat or another team just come out, just on all cylinders, and it happens sometimes. So yeah, those aren't losses I worry about. I think obviously they're beginning to figure it out. So I think, like you said, definitely come April, come May, as they start taking that turn into the playoffs. It's gonna be really fun. It's gonna be really fun to see that team. I'm also happy to start seeing them play some contenders, like seeing them play the Clippers. They're when they play LA eventually, when they play a Philly, when they play a Boston. Like that's going to be obviously with all they played Boston already, but with all three of them, and they rise to the occasion every time. So I think it's going to be great basketball when it really comes down to it. But yeah, great year he's having, amazing year. But man, that's been our moment of clarity. It's been another episode of the Right Quality, giving you our hot takes and giving you these discussions on things going on in the league. Hope y'all have enjoyed the Super Bowl. Y'all should have seen our Super Bowl clip over the weekend. And, obviously we talked about it already, so no point in talking about it on this episode, but hope we were right with our picks. Hope everybody enjoyed it and everything. And yeah, anything else for the people before we head out?
Nope. Be sure to follow at TWQ Podcast on Instagram and Twitter, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel at The Wright Quallity.
Gang, gang. But yeah, that's all we got for y'all this week, man. And until next week, and until next time, peace.